So, as a Canadian business, did you know that you may need a visa to travel back and forth to the United States, especially if you are participating in trade shows and things like that? And do you really want to risk being turned away at the border? And if you do any kind of business in the US and you aren't a resident there, stick around for today's Business Ed show because it just might save you from being fined or even banned from entering the country ever again. Join me in welcoming global entrepreneur, attorney, number one best-selling author, concierge, immigration, and business legal advisor, Lauren Cohen. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me back again.
Oh, I'm so grateful for having you here because today you're going to explain the ins and outs of an E1 and an E2 visa and whether or not a small business needs to get one. So I know that there's a lot of people out there who don't even know what these visas are and might be at a real big risk of being fined or banned from entering the country from Canada. So, Lauren, welcome to the show. I really am anticipating hearing more about this subject. And maybe we can start off with something like maybe people aren't even realizing that they are needing one. And could you explain that, even if somebody is not planning on taking up residence in the US, because that's what we typically think of a visa as,
Right.
do small businesses still need one, even if they're not planning on moving there?
So it's interesting because the general consensus, even among immigration lawyers promoting these visas, is that in order to need a visa, you have to have the intention of moving to the US or living in the US.
Mhm.
And the fact of the matter is that these visas are non-immigrant, non-resident visas. So there is no requirement to ever move under either of these two visas that we're discussing today. As a matter of fact, there's no requirement to move with an L1 visa either, but the L1 visa is a little more complicated. So we're going to focus on these E1s and E2s today, which allow for Canadians and Americans going into Canada as well to have unconditional, unrestricted access back and forth to and from the US and Canada. And it also, the beautiful thing is that both of these visas allow for a Canadian business owner that wants to stay and live in Canada to go back and forth and have business operations in the US as if they were living and working in the US. So they can get a US bank account and have a US tax ID number and even potentially a social security number. So it's a really great option that people don't think about, especially if they're doing a lot of cross-border business, which a lot of your viewers are, and certainly a lot of Canadians in Vancouver, Calgary, all the border cities, Toronto, where I'm from originally, Montreal. Like, it's very challenging to build a global business just in Canada alone. You definitely need to consider US a US point of base of operations as your global expansion opportunity.
So for those businesses who aren't, up to global domination, can you explain some specific instances where a small business in Canada might need this visa? Like what kind of instances would they be required to have one?
Sure. So if you're speaking on international, or let's just leave it to American, if you're speaking on American stages and potentially getting paid for that or selling from the stage, you need a visa to do that. You might be able to get away with it once, but once you start doing that regularly, you're going to be on the radar and you're going to be stopped at some point. You're either going to be stopped completely or you're just going to be detained. And the detainment could be so long that you may miss your opportunity to speak at that event. Okay. I mean, some of my clients have been detained as much as 10, 12 hours. I myself was detained before I had all of my visas in place. So I've been through it myself personally, and it is not fun. And it definitely is less fun if you're going to speak on a stage in, let's say, Las Vegas, and you're getting paid a speaker fee of 10 or 20,000. You're going to lose that money if you're not able to attend the event. You're going to lose the money if you set up your own event over, like, in somewhere in the US, let's say Florida, where I'm located. You know, it's very appealing to run an event in Florida in the wintertime for us Canadians. So you set up the event, you spend all this money, you rent the hotel, you hire the people to run the event, you expend a lot of resources, and then as you're about to come in for the event, you're stopped in your tracks because you don't have the right documentation in place, and they question whether you're actually going to, you know, do business in the US and accept payments in the US. I was just on this marketers cruise, which I'm sure you've seen plastered all over Facebook, and there were 400 business owners, and probably 100 of them were not from the US, from 50 from Canada and 50 from everywhere else, probably more like 60 from Canada. So I was saying to them, what happens when you come back next year? If you don't, if they start questioning you and suddenly you've spent all this money on this cruise and you can't go. I mean, this is a very important business opportunity that you're sucking up because you haven't considered the right visa options, and make sure that they're plastered in your passport.
If you are a service-based business and you never do travel to the States, but you do have American clients, does that factor in?
So that's much less problematic. It's really when you're physically in the US, you want to set up a US base of operations, a US bank account, and take payments in the US, that it becomes problematic. If you're running events in the US or you're getting paid in the US. If all of your business is from Canada and you have US clients, this visa will be less applicable to you. But it could become more applicable as you travel to see the clients, let's say, or visit with the clients, meet the clients, you know, do sessions with the clients, visit the client's work site to do an analysis, do trainings, corporate trainings, whatever the case may be. So, and it's certainly not just speakers and event planners. It's also real estate investors that have a lot of real estate investments all around, let's say, the US. They could have them in Florida, Seattle, anywhere. Okay. And they're going to visit their properties. They're doing buy and flips. They're doing flip and holds, or hold and flips, or they're doing rentals, or they're doing property management. That's another reason, as people are continuing to go back and forth and the government is continuing to crack down more and more, to put this visa in your passport as a US business owner and allow you the freedom of access and back and forth. The other thing is like product businesses or manufacturing businesses that are, a lot of them have US bases of operations already. But those that don't, let's figure out how to set that up so that you can have that access to, you know, export from the US rather than export from Canada. And within the US, suddenly your all of your delivery fees and all of that, those additional import-export fees change when you become a US business. So there's a lot of advantages to having a US base of operations. The same holds true for service, for products, for any business that really wants to have access to the global markets and or wants to be able to sell as a US business domestically within the US without ever having to move, which is the beautiful thing. And that's the key. But you can move. So with this visa, with an E1 or an E2, and let's talk briefly about what those are, but with either one of them, you can move. You can move to the US and set up, you know, your personal home and everything here, wherever you choose, but you don't have to. But that option is open to you.
Fantastic. That's excellent, because that really describes pretty clearly, you know, who really should be looking into this. And so, yeah, let's talk about, there's two different options, right? E1 and E2.
Two main options,
so
right.
Can you explain what those two options are?
Sure. So I have a book, which I actually would be happy to share with anybody that completes my quiz. I'll share the electronic link with your people, your viewers, if they so choose. It's called Finding Your Silver Lining in the Business Immigration Process. And it talks about all of the different business visas. The E1 is called the Forgotten Visa in my book, and the E2 is called the Coveted Visa. So why is that? So the E1 is a treaty trader visa. There are not a lot of applicants for this visa. I don't know why. Probably because most immigration attorneys don't really focus on it. It is available to Canadians and Brits and people from France and Israelis and so on. Some South Americans. The treaty trader visa, the requirement is not based on investment. The requirement is based on trade in goods and or services with your home country. So let's say you, Susan, set up your company in your daughter's in Houston, right?
Austin.
Okay. So let's say you decide to set up a base of operations in Austin, and you want to use that base of operations to scale your business, right?
Hmm.
So the beautiful thing about an E1 is the requirement isn't that you invest a substantial amount of money. The requirement is that you continue to trade at least 50% with your home country. That's two-way trade. That does not mean, and by the way, I want to be clear that I'm not giving legal advice on this show. I just want to be very clear about that because every case is different. So if you want to consult with me and my team, I'd be happy to do that. But I'm not giving you legal advice here. This is just general advice on the visas, okay?
Yeah.
So if you want to, if you have ongoing trade and you're buying goods and services or selling goods and services to and from Canada, that's where you qualify for the 50%. At least 50% of your trade must be with your home country. It doesn't have to be with your own company. It can be with any company from within Canada, as long as there's 50% that you can show. Even if your US base of operations, US business is selling to Canadians, at least 50% of the trade in goods and services has to be between Canada and the US, your home country and the US.
Hmm.
Okay, that's an E1. So it's based on trade between your US entity and your home country. The E2 is based on investment. It's a treaty investor visa. It's a bilateral treaty, again, as is the E1, where it can go both ways. So an American can qualify, and indeed, Tony Robbins was detained for 8 hours going to speak one time in Calgary. So
Wow.
this would be awesome for somebody like a Tony Robbins to have in his passport. Even though everybody knows who he is, the fact is the government is the government. At the end of the day, they have discretion. If you have this visa in your passport, you're going to have way fewer problems,
Mm.
way less issues. You're going to be detained like never, if at all, very rarely, and you're going to have the opportunity to travel back and forth. So the E2 is based on investment. It's a substantial investment in a non-marginal business. The definition of substantiality is dependent on the type of business. If you're a pure service-based business, your substantiality threshold is going to be lower than if you're a product-based business. Lots and lots of Canadians apply for an E2 based on real estate investing. The challenge with real estate investing in the US is that it can be a passive business, right? You don't
Hmm.
necessarily have to be in the US or with your properties to manage them.
Right.
It once in a while you come, you check, but if you're renting them and you're flipping them, you can have a realtor or a team that's doing this for you in the US, right? You don't necessarily have to be there. So you have to build a story around why you need to be there. And the story that we like to build often involves some commercial element, not just buying and flipping a house. That's not going to work. Or buying and flipping two homes, but buying and flipping, or buying and holding, buying and managing multifamily homes and expanding that to potentially commercial businesses, which is where the business plan comes in. That can be where your substantiality comes in, because in a real estate investment business, 100,000 is not going to be substantial, right?
Hmm.
Especially in Florida. So you have to create the story around why that person potentially needs to be physically present in the US to run the business, okay?
Right.
And then non-marginal means that the business has to support more than just the investor and his or her family. So you have to actually hire people. And we recommend usually between 2 and 5 people over the 5-year term of the visa. And they don't all have to be hired day one. That's again where our business plan expertise comes in to figure out the hiring structure and the hiring timeline and when you hire and who you hire and why you're hiring them and all of that. And so I guess that brings me to point 3, which is both of these visas for Canadians are 5-year visas, renewable indefinitely. That neither of them leads to a green card. You have to do another avenue if you want to go to a green card, okay?
Okay.
But both of them are renewable indefinitely. So the beautiful thing about that is, if as long as your business and you continue to qualify, you can continue to have these visas throughout the course of running your business.
Thank you. That's a lot of information, and obviously, somebody can't just go and take care of this by themselves, right?
No, I mean, people try. I have a guy right now, he's Canadian actually, and he lives in Florida, and he has a bunch of friends that have done E2. So he says, I'm just going to do it myself. I'm like, okay, knock yourself out. Come to me when you have a denial. So,
Oh,
and I have another client who's originally from Toronto who used a Canadian lawyer that had a US license to do this. And I'm going to suggest to you, whether you work with me or not, Canadian lawyers with US licenses are not always the best resources for these visas. It doesn't mean that that's not an across the board well, it is a generalization, but make sure that they do these as a rule, because things change every single day. In this client's particular case, they were given completely wrong information. Their
oh,
business plan was substandard, and they were on appeal, and they came to me, and I fixed all of their issues with them, redid the business plan, and they got approved, and now they're in their third year of stay in their E2 visa here in
wow.
Florida.
Wow.
So, you know, that's what I specialize in, is overcoming those obstacles and figuring out how to make that work, because I do understand the business side of this whole process.
Yeah, and then that's just so important to make sure you hire the right people. So, what happens if a business, doesn't have a visa and they get caught? Like, what are the ramifications? You talked about them getting detained at the border, but what else are
Right.
they facing?
Well, they could face the prospect of not being able to come back into the U.S. for a term of usually 5 years. There's a 5-year bar that could happen, and
Mm.
then you can't, or they may preclude you from operating your business within the U.S. or running, selling to the U.S. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that they can impede your business, and suddenly your revenues are shot and your profits are minimized, and you're, up a creek without a paddle.
Yeah,
And
it's a
it's
huge
just so
risk.
easy to overcome this. And
Yeah.
I think that this is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on. My first client that I worked with in this capacity, in terms of they were in Toronto, they did not want to move, but they were going back and forth to trade shows constantly. It completely changed their lives, because the husband was the one that was usually stopped. He was stopped every time they would cross, because he had a whole truckload of stuff to take to the trade show. And since we got the visa, I think we're in the 4th year, they haven't had an issue.
The peace of mind alone must be so well worth it, right?
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that really that's what we're delivering, is that peace of mind, so that when you're going back and forth, I mean, in reality, even with a green card, they can still be, whats, and challenge you.
Right.
I've had it happen personally. But
Mm.
this is definitely going to take you from very uncertain travel opportunities to pretty certain travel opportunities, and the ability to run your business from within the US.
Yeah, and that's just so important, especially for those who really do want to have that global expansion and be able to take advantage of the opportunities that doing business in the US will present to them. So to me, it's a no-brainer to contact someone like you. So how does a business owner go about obtaining their visa?
They contact me.
Yeah,
So it's a
it's
process.
as simple
I
as
mean,
that, right?
this is right. That's it. I just handle everything, and I do. So we swear we would set up your U.S. business, get you your operating or shareholders agreement, get you your registered agent, get you your business plan, set up your petition. If we need license agreements, whatever other agreements we need, we figure that out as we go through the process. And it could take anywhere from 2 to 3 months, depending on how responsive you are as a client. It can take much longer. And I'm not saying that there are never complications. There are, sometimes we need more information, sometimes we need more proof, but it's really a process, and I oversee the whole process to make sure that you don't have to deal with all of the mundane day-to-day issues. And I wanted to add something else, Susan. There
Mhm.
are grants available for businesses, and this is where I'm going to be focusing my attention in the next little while. There are grants available for businesses that are setting up shop in the US, whether it be for visas or not. So a lot of it's weird to think, a lot of Canadian and provincial governments have grants available to to companies that are setting up shop in the US. So we can talk about that. And I have an amazing program. It's basically $100 a month to work with me and develop the strategy so that you can get ready to make that investment in moving or setting up in the US, whatever the case may be, and deciding whether a move is appropriate for you or what is the best option. So that's something I would be happy to talk with each and every one of your viewers about. So basically, you can develop a strategy for global expansion that may or may not include moving.
It's not so cut and dry. Yes,
It's
apply
not.
for visa one, or two, whatever. It sounds like, somebody, they have to work with someone like you so that you
Yeah,
can ask them the right questions. And based on those responses, you can guide them down the right direction and give them all the, all the tools and paperwork and all that kind of stuff that's needed to make sure that that
correct,
transition happens seamlessly.
correct.
Yeah, I can't fathom trying to attempt to do something like that alone because we're not lawyers. You're the lawyer. So you're the one we should be going to for help like
Thank you.
this.
It's not even about, I mean, being a lawyer is a part of it, but the reality is that I think it's because of my business, strategic business, working with clients that are scaling their businesses.
Right.
Because a lot of lawyers, we know this, I can say this, are lawyers, and they're producing legal documents, and that's what they do. But they're not really looking at the business side of things.
Yeah, the
And
bigger
that's what makes
picture.
me unique is
Yeah.
first, I'm from Canada. I've made the move. I did the duty myself. I went through the process. I got a green card. I became a citizen. I've experienced it. And now I bring that experience to my clients together with building and scaling businesses globally, building and scaling global speaking businesses. How do you do that? What's the best option? Because unfortunately or unfortunately, Canada just does not have the same global impact as like a Canadian business cannot and does not have the same global impact as an American business.
Right.
It's just a reality. We're just 1/10 of the size,
Yeah.
not physically, not in
Yeah.
terms of actual
Population
size,
wise.
but
Population.
population wise,
Yeah.
1/10 of the impact. We just don't have the clout, even in spite of all the challenges America has. Canadians just don't have the clout. They have a better reputation,
Yeah.
but in order to do what a lot of these business owners need to do, we really need to look at the U.S. as a real true benchmark
Mhm.
to go forward.
And so, one quick question. Speaking of the U.S., I know that this might be a loaded question, but maybe if we can just briefly
Uh-oh.
answer yes or no. Like, what about my viewers who are in the States right now and they want to? It's like an opposite. They want to come to Canada. Um,
Same thing. It's the exact same visas. They're bilateral. And that's
oh,
the beautiful
okay.
thing. So I am licensed still in Ontario, and I can help you. It's like I said about Tony Robbins. He's American, was going into Calgary to speak. There's
Right.
a lot of issues. I think the Canadian government and the Canadian Border Patrol is cracking down more and more on
Mhm.
U.S. business owners and U.S. speakers and U.S. event planners just infiltrating Canada. It's like,
Right.
there's a protectionism that we need to have.
Yeah.
And so as a result, let's talk about how a US business owner can benefit from this, because it's the same process, just in reverse.
Oh, okay. That's very good to know. So this show is not just specifically for Canadian business owners, it's
No,
for anybody in Canada or the States who want to do
correct.
cross-border work. Okay,
Yes,
excellent.
correct. Yes.
Excellent. So
It's
where can
actually for anybody from multiple countries, Susan. Just for, if you have people in Europe, these visas are available to most Europeans as well, some
okay,
South Americans, Mexicans. I mean, Canadians have a very unique place because we also have access to the NAFTA visa, but
right.
that's something that we can also talk about as we do a consult with you, because the NAFTA visa is only available in certain categories. You might qualify for this, but it's only a 1-year visa. So each year you have to deal with a renewal. Okay.
Okay.
But there's just no shortage of options available to avoid all of these problems that may
Yeah.
not require you to physically make a move at any time in the near future, unless you want to.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you just got to protect your business and put in place what needs to be in place in order to avoid some really major ramifications. Yeah. And I've
Right.
heard of
Correct.
businesses who've run across that problem before. Now, at the
Yep.
time, I didn't realize it was all about this visa issue, but I have heard of many people saying that they've been detained at the border and, and it was a real excruciating experience to go through.
Exactly. It's not fun. I mean, I've been through it. I've been detained more than once.
Yeah.
That
It's
was
not,
not a fun experience.
not something you want anybody to go through.
No.
So how can we direct people to you? Where can they go for more information, Lauren?
Well, I have a quiz that's created specifically for people to see how they might qualify, which I know you're going to share the link to.
I
I
will.
have a longer quiz called globalbizquiz.com. That's globalbizquiz.com. You can
Okay.
find me on Facebook and LinkedIn, eCouncil Inc. It's ECOUNCILINC. And that's also my main URL is ECOUNCILINC.com, eCouncilinc.com.
Perfect.
So, but LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me. Facebook as well. I'm starting
Mhm.
to do a lot more live Facebook stuff, and I need to because people really need to know about this. So it's
Yeah.
something that I'm really capitalizing on over the course of this coming year, and I would love the opportunity to speak with each and every one of your viewers at no charge.
Fantastic. Well, and I will have all of those links down below for our viewers to take advantage of. Thank you so much, Lauren, for coming on the show today. You
It's
had reached
always a
out and
pleasure.
said, there's some really important information that needs to be shared here that not a lot of people know about. And I jumped on it because I thought, yeah, there's definitely a need to at least be aware of what your options are and to find out if you qualify or not. If this is something that you really do need to have in your arsenal in order to do cross-border business.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks again for coming on the show,
Thank
Lauren.
you.
And yeah, for you, the viewer, thank you for joining us. I hope you found this information very valuable. And please do take those quizzes that Lauren has shared with us, and those things are below. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please go ahead and click that subscribe button so that you are alerted the next time a new video is uploaded, because I create these videos for you to help you in your business to grow and not be so overwhelmed and confused by all the information and misinformation that's out there. So that's it for today's show. Thanks again, Lauren, and bye for now.
Thank you.